37 years ago, the body of a woman was found in a remote meadow near Lake Tahoe, Nevada, shot in the back of the head and left without a single piece of identification, while no relative reported her missing. Authorities pursued more than 227 leads to identify her over nearly 4 decades, entered her DNA into federal databases, contacted Interpol, and distributed facial sketches to hundreds of law enforcement agencies, but she remained only Sheep's Flat Jane Doe, buried in a grave with no headstone, marked by a cheap plastic green flag of the kind people stick in the ground to indicate a waterline, while the man who killed her was never named. However, through all those years, the Washoe County Sheriff's Office never closed the case because they believed the answer existed somewhere, only there wasn't yet the tool to read it. Then in 2018, a forensic investigator sat in the auditorium of a scientific conference in Seattle and heard about a new method that led to a result unprecedented in the history of American forensics that no one could have imagined. Before we dive deeper into this story, please let us know where you are watching from, and if you like videos like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Sheep's Flat is a meadow located along Mount Rose Highway between Reno and Lake Tahoe at an elevation of 8,900 feet, situated within 30,000 acres of wilderness, a place people drive past without noticing, except on summer days when they head up the mountain to escape the heat. On July 17, 1982, a Saturday, 2 hikers were walking in the Sheep's Flat area. They stopped. From a distance, they saw a woman slumped over a fallen log. It looked like someone bending down to tie her shoelaces and not straightening back up. They approached. She wasn't moving. Closer. She wasn't breathing. She was dead. She was wearing a sleeveless powder blue t-shirt, Lee Ryder's jeans, and yellow tennis shoes. Underneath were a blue swimsuit and a folded bikini piece in her pants pocket. She had gone out with the intention of going to the lake or the beach. A normal day in a Nevada summer. The back of her head was covered by a pair of men's underwear, placed there after she was dead, covering the wound. There was no wallet, no purse, no keys, no jewelry, no papers of any kind. Investigators fanned out across the meadow and found footprints in the dirt. 2 sets of prints walked in from the parking area to where the body was found. There was only 1 set of prints walking out. The scene was almost undisturbed, with no signs of a struggle at the location. She had walked in with her killer, and there was no indication she was afraid of him as she entered. Based on the condition of the body, investigators estimated she had been dead for about 24 hours, meaning the incident occurred on July 16. No one in the surrounding area had seen her. The autopsy confirmed she died from a single gunshot to the back of the head. The angle of the wound indicated she was bent forward when shot, possibly tying her shoelaces. She had been sexually assaulted before being shot. There were no signs of resistance, no bruises on her arms, no broken fingernails, no defensive wounds. The medical examiner estimated her age at 25 to 35, height 5'5", 1.65 m, weight approximately 112 pounds, 51 kg. Brown hair in a bun, hazel eyes. Her last meal was salad, but her body told much more. Vaccination scar on her left arm, blackened big toenail on the left foot, an old injury, old scars in 3 places, left knee, right shin, right foot, and an 11 centimeters long scar across her abdomen, consistent with a cesarean section incision. This woman had given birth, and her teeth were so distinctive that a dentist would remember them forever. Multiple fillings and crowns, a gold bridge with porcelain facing spanning 3 teeth on the upper left, crooked front teeth, lower jaw twisted out of alignment. This type of dental work, along with the vaccination scar, initially suggested she might be from Europe, a theory that would guide the investigation for nearly 30 years. DNA was collected from the crime scene evidence, but in 1982, the technology wasn't advanced enough to do anything with it. The samples were placed in storage and left there waiting. No one called. No one reported her missing. Not a single relative, friend, or coworker asked about her. She was buried at our Mother of Sorrows Catholic Cemetery in Reno, in a grave with no headstone. A woman no one knew by name, lowered into the ground with no one who knew her standing beside it. She was given a name that wasn't hers, Sheep's Flat Jane Doe. From the very beginning, the Washoe County Sheriff's Office did everything a standard homicide investigation could do. They canvassed every hotel and lodge in the Lake Tahoe area, asking every front desk clerk, every housekeeper, every guest, if anyone recognized the woman, if anyone had left luggage and not returned. No one recognized her. No one had left anything behind. They distributed facial sketches to more than 300 law enforcement agencies across the western United States. They ran her fingerprints through the national database. No matches. They checked her dental records with dentists. Her distinctive and sophisticated dental work was the kind a dentist would remember, but no one recognized it. The vaccination scar and type of dental work suggested she might be from Europe. Interpol was contacted. The response from Interpol was the same as everywhere else. No matches. Hundreds of missing persons files matching her physical description were opened, compared detail by detail, then closed. By 2015, that number had reached 227 files. 227 times of hope, followed by disappointment. None of them was her. DNA was collected from the crime scene evidence, and when forensic DNA technology began to develop in the 1990s, investigators pulled the samples out of storage and ran them through the new tools. The rape kit preserved from the day the body was found contained a full DNA profile of the killer. That profile was entered into CODIS, the FBI's federal criminal DNA database. No matches. Not a single suspect was ever named throughout the many years of investigation, not because of a lack of effort, but because investigators were facing a complete wall. A woman dead with no name, killed by a man who wasn't in any system. In 1993, 11 years after the case, Colo TV in Reno took Detective Dawn Means back to the Sheep's Flat crime scene for a news report. Means stood in the middle of the meadow where the woman was found and summarized the impasse. "We've checked hundreds of people. If we knew who she was, we would know who killed her." That was the core problem of the entire case. Two questions that depended on each other in a way that made both unanswerable. The case appeared in local media in waves, never becoming a national story, never big enough to draw the necessary attention. It lived on the back pages of newspapers, appearing when some reporter revisited old files, then sank back into obscurity. The original investigators gradually left the office due to age. New ones arrived, read the file, and ran into the same dead ends the previous ones had. The case outlived the careers of many investigators. Washoe County did not have a dedicated cold case unit for most of the time this file remained open. There was no one paid to sit down with old files and do only that. But there were people who wouldn't let go. Larry Canfield, one of the original investigators who had retired, never stopped believing the case would be solved. He continued working on it in his own way after leaving the office, researching new leads as they appeared, following every small advance in forensic technology. "Once we have the suspect's DNA," he said, "sooner or later it will break." In 2010, a new evaluation of her teeth by a forensic odontologist shattered the European theory that had guided the investigation for nearly 30 years. Her teeth were not European dental work, but American. The theory had been wrong from the start, and when it collapsed, 3 decades of investigation in that direction collapsed with it. In 2015, Detective Dave Jenkins, working in Washoe County's newly formed cold case unit, rebuilt the theory from the ground up. She was from the west coast of the United States, not from across the Atlantic, and she may have voluntarily cut off contact with family and friends many years before her death, which explained why no one reported her missing. That same year, the Washoe County Sheriff's Office featured the case as their Cold Case of the Month on Facebook, hoping social media would reach people that flyers and television reports over 33 years had not. Artist Carl Kopelman, an accountant by profession who had volunteered to create forensic sketches for unidentified victims since 2009, completing more than 250 sketches before taking on this case, created an image of the woman's facial reconstruction from Sheep's Flat. For the first time in 33 years, people could see her face in a way that was somehow closer to reality than a faded yearbook photo. Her file was posted on NAMU's and Doe Network, 2 major public databases for the unidentified. True crime bloggers and podcasters took notice of the story. No one solved it, but they kept her visible, kept her searched for, kept her alive in the community's consciousness. And meanwhile, in the unmarked grave at our Mother of Sorrows cemetery in Reno, marked only by a cheap plastic green flag stuck in the ground, Sheep's Flat Jane Doe still lay there waiting. Mary Edith Silvani was born on September 29, 1948, in Pontiac, Michigan, and grew up in Detroit, the only daughter of John Edward Silvani an Italian immigrant born in France, and Blanche, a Canadian woman whose maiden name was Curry, a dark coincidence that no one could have foreseen. Curry was also the surname of the man who would kill her. She had two older brothers, Robert and Charles, but her childhood fell apart very early and in multiple directions at once. Her mother struggled with mental illness for years and then left when the children were still young, never returning, and died in 1980 without ever seeing her children again. Her father raised the three children alone, then passed away in 1964 when Mary was 16. At age 16, she had no father, no mother, no family network to rely on, and no real home that belonged to her. Former classmate Paula Headley remembered her from those years. Loved art, often visited the Detroit Institute of Arts, quiet, kind, never talked about her family. She attended Mackenzie High School in Detroit. There is a photo of her in the 1966 yearbook, but no graduation record, no personal end-of-year photos. After their father died, the siblings tried to keep the house in Detroit so Mary could finish school. But one by one they moved west to California, and all three scattered in different directions, each carrying their own lives with no bond strong enough to keep them together. Around 1972, Mary disappeared from the lives of everyone who had known her in Michigan. The last time anyone saw her, she was pregnant and living in a boarding house for single women. Then there was a phone call. The child had been given up for adoption. That was the last time anyone heard her voice. Somewhere, a child was born, and she let him or her go. The 11 centimeter scar on her abdomen that the medical examiner measured 10 years later was the only remaining evidence of that moment. In 1974, she was arrested for vagrancy in Detroit, a minor, insignificant violation, the kind people forget right after paying the fine. Her fingerprints were recorded in the Detroit police file, placed in a drawer, and no one thought about it again. Between 1974 and 1982, no one who knew her during those years has ever been found. An 8-year stretch of life existed with absolutely no witnesses, no co-workers who remembered her name, no landlords who remembered her face, no neighbors who knew where she lived. She moved from Michigan to California sometime between those dates, but exactly when, by what route, to where first, no one knows. The people she left behind in Michigan all had the same story. Mary wanted to start over. She was out there somewhere. They hoped she was okay. No one thought anything was wrong. No one reported her missing, not because they didn't care, but because Mary had gradually made her absence normal long before she died. She had lived so invisibly that when she stopped existing, the world didn't notice the difference. That was the real tragedy of Mary Silvani, not the way she died, but the way she had lived. A woman whose life had taken away everything that had once kept her visible, one person at a time, 1 year at a time, until nothing was left but her and the darkness around her. In February 2018, several forensic experts from the Washoe County Sheriff's Office flew to Seattle to attend the annual conference of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. This was the kind of conference where investigators and forensic experts came to catch up on the latest methods in the field. And that week, one of the presentations was on a topic most people in the auditorium had never heard of: forensic genealogy. The speaker was Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick had built her career in physics, worked for NASA and the Department of Defense, then left it all to tackle a completely different type of problem. She founded Identifinders International with a specific mission, using Y chromosomal testing to trace the identities of unidentified male killers in cold cases. Men like the one who had shot the woman at Sheep's Flat and walked away leaving nothing but DNA. The Washoe County team sat in that auditorium, listening, and gradually realized they might be looking at the answer to their longest unsolved case. Sharing the stage with Fitzpatrick was Margaret Press, co-founder of a newer organization called the Jane Doe Project. Press came from a completely different world. She had published novels, written code in finance, and consulted in linguistics. She had been drawn into this world from a hobby that began in 2007, genetic genealogy, connecting adopted children with their biological families. The light bulb moment came one afternoon while she was reading a Sue Grafton novel and suddenly realized that the genealogy skills she used to find birth parents for adoptees could be used for the opposite, giving names back to the dead. In both cases, you're looking for parents, she said. In 2017, Fitzpatrick and Press co-founded the Jane Doe Project, a non-profit organization with a single mission, giving names back to unidentified remains across America. No one in the organization received a salary. More than 60 volunteer genealogists worked for free. Press was straightforward about finances when asked. "We don't make money. In fact, we've put quite a bit of our savings into this." At the time the Washoe County team sat in that Seattle auditorium, forensic genealogy was still a method most of the world had never heard of. The Golden State Killer had not yet been caught, and the name Joseph James DeAngelo had not yet appeared in any newspaper. But just a few weeks after work on the Silvani case began, on April 24, 2018, California announced the arrest of DeAngelo using exactly that method, and forensic genealogy became global news overnight. It must be made clear, the Silvani case was not inspired by the Golden State Killer case. The work had started before, but that arrest validated the method for all those who still doubted it, and it showed that the Washoe County team was on the right track. In April 2018, Washoe County officially contacted both the Jane Doe Project and Identifinders International. Evidence from the case was packaged and sent to a private laboratory, where technicians extracted usable DNA profiles from samples that had been in storage for 36 years. The rape kit collected the day the body was found in 1982, properly preserved through decades, contained a full DNA profile of the killer. And now, for the first time, someone knew how to read it. Two parallel tasks were assigned: identify the victim from DNA taken from the body and identify the perpetrator from the DNA in the rape kit. Two different family trees, built simultaneously from two different DNA samples in the same case. No one had ever done both in the same case before. The victim's DNA profile was uploaded to GEDmatch, a public genealogy database where millions of people around the world voluntarily upload their DNA profiles to search for relatives. Margaret Press described how it works with a simple image. Like a DNA swap meet, where there are family tables everywhere, and you ask each other, "I'm looking for a piece of silverware that matches my set. Do you have a spoon in this pattern?" The initial results came faster than anyone predicted. The victim's DNA profile suggested that one of her grandparents was Italian or of Italian descent. Her mitochondrial DNA placed her in a genetic haplogroup called H16A1, and two distant cousins appeared in the database, people who had no idea they had just become the first link in the chain that would return a name to a woman who had lain in an unmarked grave for 36 years. Those two distant cousins led to other family connections in New York. From there, the Jane Doe Project worked backward up the family tree, climbing from branch to branch, eliminating possibilities until the family tree pointed to a couple in Detroit, Michigan, John and Blanche Silvani. The couple had only one daughter, and the family tree said that Sheep's Flat Jane Doe was that daughter. Just 3 days from the first GEDmatch results to a name. 3 days to answer a question that had remained open for decades. But having a name and proving it were two completely different things. Investigators contacted the Detroit Police Department and found what they needed in a place no one had thought to look. In 1974, a woman had been arrested for vagrancy in Detroit, a minor, insignificant violation, and her fingerprints had been kept on file for more than 4 decades. They compared those fingerprints with the fingerprints taken from the body in 1982. A perfect match. In July 2018, the Jane Doe Project publicly announced that they believed they knew who she was. 2 months later, Washoe County had the necessary confirmation. In August 2018, Washoe County Chief Medical Examiner Laura Knight signed the official death certificate. 36 years after she died, she finally officially existed in government records. But no one was notified, because the killer had not yet been identified, and a public announcement at that point could ruin everything. At the press conference, Kopelman's sketch and the yearbook photo were placed side by side on the screen. The imagined face and the real face, next to each other for the first time. Both of Mary's brothers had already passed away by the time her name was found. The truth about her came too late for both of them. The closest living relative was her nephew Robert Silvani Jr., a man who had never met her. Robert Jr.'s father was Robert Sr., who had stayed in Detroit for a while, started a family, had a son, then fell apart, cut off his wife and child, drifted to California, and kept going, dying alone in Oregon. When his father disappeared, Robert Jr. was only 4 years old, and he grew up with no one. About a year before the press conference, Robert Jr.'s phone lit up with a Facebook notification he never expected. The DNA Doe Project had found him. The message said that a murder victim had been linked to his family tree and asked if he would be willing to provide a DNA sample. His sample confirmed what the genealogists had suspected, but he was asked to keep quiet because the killer had not yet been identified. He waited for many months, carrying the secret of a relative he had never met, who had been killed before he was born. The DNA process also connected Robert Jr. to a distant cousin named Angel Capriles in New York City, a relative he didn't know existed. Capriles' mother and Mary had grown up together. "There are so many questions we don't know," Capriles said, like why she never came back to the Bronx. And everyone thought she had a good life. The DNA from the rape kit contained a full profile of the killer. But when it was entered into CODIS, no matches came back because he had never left DNA in the criminal justice system. That DNA profile existed, clear and complete, but no name was attached to it. Identifinders International, led by Colleen Fitzpatrick, took on the task. The killer's DNA was uploaded to GEDmatch, and the results matched descendants of a couple in Dallas, Texas. The genealogists began building the family tree from there. The Dallas couple had 3 sons and only 1 known grandson. Initial investigation immediately ruled out the known grandson. The suspect was not a known member of the family, he was a secret. One of the 3 sons had a child out of wedlock, and that child had been given a completely different surname. That was one of the reasons it took so long to find him. Genealogist Cheryl Hester spent months chasing a deliberately hidden family branch, narrowing the search to a neighborhood in Dallas where 2 sisters were each raising a child alone, both children born out of wedlock, both carrying their mother's surname. Hester didn't stop until she found the answer. His name was James Richard Curry, born on November 16, 1946, in Bexar County, Texas. An illegitimate child whose father came from a Dallas family that did not want to acknowledge the boy, whose mother raised him under her own surname, and that was why his identity had been blurred out of every family tree. He had a criminal record, arrested for robbery in Texas, served time at Huntsville Prison, released in 1977, then moved to Wakena, a small place in Tulare County, California, where he worked at J&M Locksmith. Investigators also suspected he had killed a locksmith co-worker in Wakena. That man's remains were never found. In early 1982, before the Silvani case, Richard Lemon Jr. was shot and killed by Curry. Curry stuffed Lemon's body into a barrel and hid it in a self-storage unit in Santa Clara on De La Cruz Boulevard, where it remained until Curry confessed. On July 17, 1982, Mary Silvani was sexually assaulted and shot to death at Sheep's Flat. Then, on January 2, 1983, Curry showed up at the apartment of 39-year-old Gerald Novoslutz and his 34-year-old wife Sharon. The couple ran a competing self-storage business in San Jose. Curry shot Gerald in the head right inside the house, took $400, sexually assaulted Sharon, and dragged her out to his yellow Lincoln Continental. He drove to a stretch of State Route 92 in San Mateo County near Crystal Springs Reservoir. Sharon tried to escape, but he caught her, assaulted her again, shot her in the head, and left her body by the side of the road. On January 4, 1983, Curry walked into the San Jose Police Department on his own. No one had to arrest him, he turned himself in. He confessed to killing the Novoselitz couple and Richard Lemon. He asked the detective to shoot him, but he said nothing about Nevada. He never mentioned Sheep's Flat. He never mentioned the woman slumped over the log. He never mentioned anything that happened on July 17, 1982. The day after he was booked into Santa Clara County Jail, Curry tore a piece of fabric from the mattress cover and tried to harm himself. A prison book distributor found him and called for help. Resuscitation efforts failed. Doctors at San Jose placed him in the ICU on life support. 2 days passed with no improvement. On January 7, 1983, doctors concluded there was nothing more they could do. They turned off the machines. He was pronounced dead at 7:30 p.m. Because Curry died before going to trial, he was never convicted of any crime. And because there was no conviction, his DNA was never entered into any law enforcement database. That was the answer to the question that had haunted the case for decades. They had evidence from day one. It just had nothing to match it to. To confirm Curry was the killer, a Washoe County detective contacted 2 of his adult children, Both voluntarily provided DNA samples without being compelled. The Washoe County Forensic Science Division confirmed the DNA from both children was consistent with the DNA at the Silvani crime scene. Curry was their father and the perpetrator who killed Mary Silvani. His pattern was unmistakable: sexual assault followed by a gunshot to the back of the head. He did it to Sharon Novoslatz on State Route 92, and he had done it to Mary Silvani in the Sheep's Flat Meadow. But what no one knows, and will never know, is how and where Mary and Curry met. Had they met before that day? Did they drive out to Sheep's Flat together, or was she already there when he arrived? Did she know his name? Did he know hers? Those questions were closed forever on January 7, 1983, when doctors turned off the machines in the ICU in San Jose. On May 7, 2019, the Washoe County Sheriff's Office held a press conference in Reno. The podium was lined with badges and uniforms, police officers, prosecutors, representatives from the agencies involved in the investigation. And right in the middle of all those people were two women who didn't look like anyone else there, not in uniform, not wearing badges. Colleen Fitzpatrick looked around, smiled, and said, "Two little old ladies." For the first time in 37 years, both the victim and the killer had been identified at the same time. On the screen at the press conference, the organizers placed two images side by side: the facial sketch Carl Kopelman had created from the forensic profile, and the faded yearbook photo from Mackenzie High School in 1966. The imagined face and the real face next to each other for the first time. People could look at both and see that Kopelman hadn't been far off. When the case was made public, Robert Silvani Jr., the nephew who had never met his aunt, spoke out. He said he wanted Mary to know she was loved. He had never met her, never seen a photo of her until the detective showed him one, had never heard her voice or known her name until a Facebook message from a stranger changed everything. But she was family, and that meant something to a man who had grown up with no one. His father left when he was 4, his aunt died before he was born, an entire family scattered in different directions across generations. He said he wanted to put a nice headstone on her grave. The DNA process had also given Robert Jr. something he never expected: a relative he didn't know existed. Angel Capriles, living in New York City, was connected to Mary's family tree through that same database. Capriles' mother and Mary had grown up together. Capriles said, "There are so many questions we don't know, like why she never came back to the Bronx." After the identity was made public, Capriles stood at Mary's grave in our Mother of Sorrows cemetery, looking down at the plot where that woman had lain for 37 years, and said something unforgettable. "I just think about all the people out there who don't even have a green flag." For many years, the only thing marking Mary's grave was a small plastic green flag stuck in the ground, the kind construction crews use to mark where water lines are buried. That was all she had. No headstone, no name, no date of birth or date of death. Just a plastic green flag in the dirt, among graves with names of people who were remembered. After the case was closed, the Diocese of Reno donated a granite headstone for Mary's grave. The inscription on the stone was written by the two relatives who found each other through her death, Robert Silvani Jr. and Angel Capriles, strangers before DNA brought them together. "Our lost angel has been taken to heaven. She has been found and will never be lost again." As for James Richard Curry, he died in 1983, never tried for any crime, never confronted with what he had done to Mary Silvani at Sheep's Flat. Investigators believe he had at least 4 known victims, possibly more. One of them, the locksmith co-worker from Wakena, his remains were never found. And Curry left this world without knowing that 36 years later, 2 of his children would voluntarily give DNA samples to police, and science would do what he thought could never happen: link him to the unidentified woman in the Sheep's Flat Meadow and give her back what he had taken: a name. The question many people asked after the case was closed was, why did it take 37 years? The answer was not negligence or carelessness, but the convergence of many limitations at once, each one completely reasonable at the time, but together creating a wall that could not be overcome with conventional tools. CODIS, the federal criminal DNA database, only works when the perpetrator has previously left DNA in the system, been arrested, convicted, and sampled. Curry had no DNA record because his robbery occurred before the era of forensic DNA, and he died before being tried for the murders. There was no path from the crime scene DNA to his name through any government database. Mary's fingerprints from 1974 existed in the Detroit police file for more than 4 decades. But no one thought to search minor criminal records from another state for a victim in Nevada, because there was no reason to think of it. And the European theory, although it started from reasonable observations about the vaccination scar and dental work, had led the investigation in the wrong direction for nearly 30 years. And when that theory collapsed in 2010, many decades of investigation had already gone down a dead-end path. But there was a deeper gap than all of that, a gap that no technology or theory could fill. The system was designed to find people who were being looked for. Mary Silvani was not being looked for. She had lived invisibly long before she died. No stable family, no recorded permanent address, no steady job, no one waiting for her to come home. The people who had known her in Michigan all thought she had chosen to disappear, and in the context of her life, that was a completely reasonable assumption. No one reported her missing, not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know there was anything to worry about. And this is the gap the system had no mechanism to handle. People who live on the margins of society, people without family or friend networks strong enough to notice their absence, who die as anonymously as they lived. No one reporting meant no missing person file to compare against. No file meant no starting point, and no starting point meant the investigation spun in circles for decades. The Jane Doe project was created to solve exactly this problem, to identify unnamed victims that the regular system could not handle by using GEDmatch instead of relying only on CODIS. GEDmatch does not require the perpetrator or victim to have ever interacted with the criminal justice system. It only requires their relatives, anywhere in the world, to have voluntarily uploaded their own DNA profiles to search for ancestors. And the entire organization runs on volunteer labor, more than 60 genealogists working without pay, no one making money from it. The organization sustained by the time and savings of people who believe every unidentified dead person deserves a name. What made the Silvani case a turning point in forensic history is that it was the first time forensic genealogy was used to identify both the victim and the perpetrator in the same case at the same time. The case of Mary Edith Silvani leaves behind a practical lesson that anyone in America can act on today. Upload your DNA to public genealogy databases like GEDmatch, 23andMe, or Ancestry DNA. Not because you're looking for relatives, but because when millions of people do it, cases like Silvani become solvable. Your DNA doesn't just tell your story, it tells the story of distant relatives you've never met. And sometimes it is the only remaining link to give a name back to the dead. Second, if you know someone who has lost contact with their family for a long time, a sibling, an old friend, someone who disappeared from everyone's life with no known reason, don't assume they're okay. The system does not automatically search for people no one reports. If you think something is wrong, make the call, make the report. Let the authorities decide if there's a problem, and don't let your silence be the reason someone lies in an unmarked grave for 30-some years. Third, if you are in law enforcement or work in forensics, preserve evidence, no matter how unsolvable a case seems. Mary Silvani's rape kit sat in storage for 36 years. If someone had thrown it away thinking it was useless, James Richard Curry would never have been identified. Science catches up. Let the evidence wait for it. If the story of Mary Edith Silvani touched you, please hit subscribe so you don't miss the next cases. Every person in those files deserves to have a name. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. See you in the next video.